The fact that China and the US are among the first to sign the agreement, I think is very important as a signal to other countries that these two big players will take part in this agreement. You might remember the United States has not participated in the Kyoto Protocol, which was the predecessor of the Paris Agreement, so this is very important. On the other hand, the event itself, the signing of the treaty, is, I would say, mainly a symbolic event that signals support, continued support for the agreement made last December. China and the US were very important in the sense that they early on communicated a willingness to come to an agreement, and that helped all other countries to come forward with their own commitments. Because it's still the idea that limiting your greenhouse gas emissions will come at a cost for your economy. So you wouldn't want to limit your own emissions unless you know that a competitor in the global economy will also contribute their fair share. So it was important. The US always argued against the Kyoto Protocol or justified its absence from the Kyoto Protocol by saying that China doesn't have any commitments under the Kyoto Protocol, and therefore the deal is not a good one for the US. And China obviously always argued that historically the responsibility for climate change is with industrialized countries and not with emerging economies. I think so far a lot of energy went into the negotiations, into figuring out what kind of deal would be possible. And as long as that was not clear, it was also difficult for countries to go first and implement any of their climate strategies. So what we'll have to follow now is a shift towards implementation, I think. The most important part will be that the major players, the major states, that's not only the US and China, that's the European Union, that's also Canada, Australia, Japan, other emerging economies, Brazil, maybe even India, that they will take the lead. Because if one of them fails to implement, fails to live up to their commitments, the deal will be at risk. And I think the second important part is that industrialized countries live up to their commitments in financial terms to provide funding for mitigation and adaptation measures in developing countries. Given the current prices of oil and other fossil fuels, that's of course a challenge. I mean, they're so cheap that developing your economy on the basis of these energy sources is highly attractive. In many ways, I think emerging economies can learn from the mistakes and from the lessons that industrialized countries have drawn. But in many ways, I think the growth of emerging economies will, for a certain time, be on the basis of additional greenhouse gas emission, and there will not be a quick reduction of these. Politically, I think technology transfer is something that could help, and funding for the development of new technologies, funding research, so that the next technologies that will lead to reduced emissions of greenhouse gases will become available, and will become available at a cost that is affordable for these countries. On the other hand, I would say politically, it's also important to send a message that the historical responsibility for global climate emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, is still an accurate argument, so that the emerging countries do, in principle, have a right to claim that they didn't break the climate, so they shouldn't be the first ones to fix it. I think these are the two sides. On the one hand, it's a cooperation problem that no one wants to go first without knowing that the others will also do their share. On the other hand, one side has a good argument to say we didn't break it, so why should we fix it? Well, it's clear why they should fix it, because they will feel the consequences of not fixing it themselves, and that's what I think they've also increasingly realized, that the historical responsibility argument doesn't help them to go the whole way. It does. I think politically it's important that industrialized countries nonetheless accept that argument and contribute more than emerging markets.